Welcome to another episode of Break Away from the Rat Race. And today I have the pleasure of speaking with Alex Breshears, who is a private money lender, but she's also a short term rental owner, manager, educator, limited partner in multifamily syndicators, and a community builder. We're going to talk about her Facebook group called Private Lending Lessons as well. And obviously, a very busy woman. How are you doing, Alex?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you for having me.
So lots of things on your plate, on your resume here. I see multifamily syndication, short-term rentals. I see passive real estate investors in different section. Military spouses. You're helping military spouses also to grow their financial independence. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on. So tell us a little bit. I mean, a lot of our, as we discussed, a lot of our listeners are kind of like getting into real estate. They want to be inspired that it's something that is feasible, and to take how they take action, how do they get there, how do they build a rental portfolio and be as successful as you are today.
It really starts with, for me, it was trial and error that ultimately ended up in the wisdom that I needed to have a conversation with myself and my spouse and my family for what our goals were. Because a lot of people, they'll want to leave their W-2 job because, they think they hate their job. They basically just want out of their job. So they're going to start investing in real estate. What they don't think about in that case is that they're ultimately working themselves into another job
Yeah.
when in reality what they want is time freedom, geographical freedom, and nobody's really having a conversation with new investors to say, is the style of investing that I have chosen actually going to fit my goals and my lifestyle? Because if you think about it, masterminds and a boot camp are very popular right now. If you
Yeah.
sign yourself up for a Burr boot camp, you're going to go to this boot camp. They're not going to try and talk you out of the Burr method. They're just going to teach
Yeah.
you everything they
Exactly.
know about the Burr method.
Yeah, yeah, and there was some big training programs out there, and they cost a lot of money. And when you get in there, first of all, they take all your money, and then so you have no money to invest in real estate anymore. And then the first thing they say, well, since you have no money, we're going to talk to you about wholesaling, or we're going to, well. So that's kind of yeah, I hear you. I mean, it's just like, you had already something to be done. There's already a lot of information out there. You may or may not need to go and spend that huge amount of money to get some training. There might be some other alternatives out there. My recommendation is to find someone like yourself that is going to coach and mentor them and tell them a little bit, share information in different free Facebook groups, for example, and then get going that way and ask questions.
Yeah, and ask the right questions. It's
Yeah.
not so much, how do I burr, but you really need to sit down and go, what do you like about this method of investing? What don't you like?
Yeah.
Where do you see yourself in 5 years? What was your goal? Why did you get started? And if nothing they say resonates with you, then you're probably not going to be a burr investor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the other thing too, when I talk about, I have like something that's in my book. I write about strategy alignment. So your goal is to achieve financial freedom, but then so many people, when they choose a strategy, they're going to say, "Well, I'm going to choose a Burr method. I'm going to flip houses or do wholesaling." Well, this is not in line with a passive income strategy because you have to be actively involved. It takes a lot of time and effort to get and consistent, like flipping. Once you flip the house, you have to find another house, you have to find another rehab bid and get the contract done and then sell it again. So definitely not passive income. So there's that alignment that needs to happen. And also the other thing that needs to be aligned is are your resources. So how much time do you have to be in that, to dedicate to that particular strategy? How much money you have? Any kind of special skills you have, or access to information? So, so that's kind of what I think is important. And again, the burst strategy. If you're working full time 9 to 5, you don't have time to do potentially a burst strategy, and that's what's important. A lot of people are focused also on the returns, and they kind of like work a little bit on one strategy and say, well, I can make better returns somewhere else. Well, yeah, you could potentially make better returns, but that could mean, different things too. That means that you need to have more money, maybe it needs to have more time, maybe you need to have more special skill, maybe there's more risk. But again, it's the alignment that you have to have with your goal, and that's what I think is important.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think that conversation's being had enough with new
Yeah.
investors.
Yeah. The other thing too that you mentioned, and also that not many people mention, is the alignment with your family. So your family is an important component. I mean, for myself, I mean, I run a family business, and I wouldn't be where I am today without my sons and without my wife. So it is very important. Yes, I wanted to get out of the W-2 job and the 9 to 5. And for me, like I was actually an independent consultant before, so it was more like, the 7 to 7. But yeah, so that was a lot of your family is your support group, is part of your team. Get them involved. So I think this is very important.
And my family is very unique in the fact that being a military family, I've moved 19 times in the last 20 years. And
Wow.
as anybody that's involved in real estate knows, real estate tends not to be a very quick moving asset. So if
Yeah.
you're only going to live somewhere 3 months, 6 months, 9 months out of the year and potentially never go back there, it makes it very hard to be an active investor because,
Yeah.
by the time you're there, it's time to leave. So what are you going to do in that 3, 6, 9 months as an active investor? So my
Mhm.
family actually really led the charge, led the movement to having to find a way to invest in real estate that went along with my family's lifestyle.
This is a perfect example, and I've never realized that, but this goes again with the alignment. You have to find the right strategy that works for you, that works with your resources and stuff like that. And you have a very specific challenge here. I mean, you can't just say, "Oh, I'm going to buy rental properties in my backyard and I'm going to manage it myself." And then, hey, now all of a sudden you go to Germany and you go here and you go there, and it's like, okay, well, that doesn't work. So very specific. So you have to find the strategy that's aligned with your goal, but also aligned with your specific situation to make sure that this is a success.
Yes, and it took us a few falls, a few flops in real estate to come to that conclusion. I wish I was cognizant enough early on to say
Yeah.
we had pre-planned that out. It actually ended up being that way because we learned from our mistakes.
Uh-huh. So how did you approach that? So you looked at your situation, you looked at the constraints that you have in terms of your time and being having to move on a regular basis, and probably not knowing when you will move as well. So how did you approach that and you look at all the different strategies in the spectrum, and to pick a couple of strategies that might work for you? How did you find that?
It really started with going to the local RIA meetings, back before COVID when you could gather in a group and, talk to people. Many, many years ago, 20 years ago, I went to a RIA meeting and just happened to bump into a gentleman. I was in college at the time and, we were just, making conversation, and I told him I was a chemistry major. And he said, well, you must be pretty good with numbers. And I'm like, yeah, I'm in Calc 3, I could do this. And he mentioned something about it. He goes, have you ever thought about being a hard money loan broker? And I'm like, no, honestly, never even, wasn't even on my radar. And he explained a little bit about it. And then he said the magic words every college student loves to hear is you can work your own hours. And I was like, sure, let's give this a go. And looking back on it now, he was more a private money lender than a true hard money lender because he lent out mostly his capital and his family's capital. But when I was taken on board with that particular position, I was seeing active real estate from kind of behind the curtain. This was
Mhm.
back before, smartphones were a thing. I was actually driving out to properties and
Wow.
having the active investors fill out the loan application. I'm looking at their scope of work in person. I'm seeing all these things. So I was getting a crash course in active real estate, but I wasn't necessarily, like you said, I didn't go to a boot camp. I was doing this through my job. And on the flip side of that, since it was a small office, I was also the person that was cashing the checks. So when, you have to go and make your hard money loan payment every month for your flip or your rehab or whatever you're doing, I was the one that was physically driving the checks to the bank way back then. And the one thing I always noticed, because obviously they're coming into the office sometimes to pay their checks, and you're hearing these stories. Oh, the contractor ran off with, half of my deposit or whatever, the contractor's 2 months behind. I'm waiting on windows, this, that, and the other thing. The tenant moved in, hasn't paid a rent payment since. It's like, no matter what happened, no matter what the problem was, they were always there showing up to pay their mortgage payment.
Yeah.
And so, like, no matter what. And, again, going back to these RIA groups, I joined some landlord groups, because again, that's what everybody's kind of new impression of real estate as a new person is: you're going to be a landlord, you're going to be a fix and flip. There's no other option. So I joined a landlord group. And in the particular market I was in at the time, it really seemed like when you sat down and listened to the landlords, was the process basically was put someone in there, cross your fingers, nothing breaks for 30 days. And then maybe at the end of those 30 days, you can keep your $100, $150 a month. And then as soon as the first rolled around, you're playing the same game again, versus me going to the office, working for this hard money lender, routinely cashing checks for $700 to $2,700 a month. There's no keeping your fingers crossed something didn't break. We weren't getting phone calls at 2 a.m. that the hot water heater blew out. It was just two completely different worlds. And that's kind of what sparked my interest in doing that. And then now with COVID and, technology's progressed, investing in real estate remotely is a lot more ubiquitous in our community.
Exactly.
So the idea that I could invest in Florida and live in Washington State, I can invest in Virginia and live in Florida. Like, as long as I know the market, I know my metrics, as long as I have internet access and electricity, I can do that. So no matter where my spouse gets sent, I can go, as long as there's electricity and internet, because I'm not going otherwise, because I need air conditioning.
Oh, come on. As long as it's the pool or the ocean.
No, I need air conditioning.
So are you doing it in specific markets, or so that, because if you do hard money lending and stuff like that, you want to make sure that the property is going to be, is going to appraise to a certain value, it's going to be, and it makes sense. So are you, when you're analyzing your deals, do you choose like specific markets that you're very well aware of, that you have a lot of information about, or it could be any projects anywhere?
It actually, so back it up even further. So when you're talking about lending as a way of investing, there's actually a whole umbrella of regulations that you have to make sure you are staying within. So for example, certain states, you actually need a license, a mortgage broker's license, to lend out your own money. Some, different states have different, what's called usury laws, which means that's the upper limit of what somebody can charge for fees and points and interest rates. So most private lenders that I personally know only lend in a very small market, usually only in one state, because they know what the lending laws are, they know what the usury laws are, they know what the foreclosure process looks like. So it tends to be very hyper local. Private lending is very hyper local.
Yeah.
So if you know one specific market, again, as long as you know that market well, if you have boots on the ground, if you're not living there, you have a realtor to pull a CMA, for example, maybe a home inspector to go and walk through and make sure that the renovation process is actually happening. It's progressing in a way that you're being told it's progressing. You could do it anywhere, but you really have to be cognizant of those lending laws. So once most private lenders have that kind of ironed out, they tend to stick to that no matter where they live, unless they move from, one city in one state to another city in that same state.
Yeah. And then and now also, I mean, with technology, it's so much easier to actually, you can get a CMA and wait for that, but you can also go on Zillow, Trulia, and stuff like that, and then figure out, do your own comps, and then figure out a little bit kind of like what the value, what the after repair value of the property is going to be, and all of that, if all these numbers actually make sense, right?
Absolutely. So there is a lot of due diligence you can do on your own.
Yeah. So what is, and you also are a real estate owner, so you own some properties and stuff like that. I think they're mainly like short-term rentals, right? So tell us a little bit about that, and kind of like, just like why you decide to go into that market. And then, because this is also something maybe that, is a little bit time consuming. So I'm a little bit curious about that side of it. And so tell us more.
That is a product of one of our major flubs in life. So within the military community, you're told, the way to get into real estate investing is go buy a home with your VA loan, and then when you move, rent it out, which
Yeah.
is exactly what we did. Only we moved 3,000 miles away, several time zones away. We left the property in care of a property manager, which came recommended from our local RIA group. And it was very, very poorly managed. We got some very bad tenants in there. They did a lot of damage to the property.
Wow.
So we decided we were never, ever, ever again going to have long-term rental property. It just, it didn't suit our, again, we didn't have that conversation about what is our skills, what is our goals. It just didn't suit any of them. And unfortunately, we realized that after it already was a thing in our life. So when we got back into the mode of property ownership, you think about, what are the different ways and what are the different types of property we can own? What is our lifestyle? Well, our lifestyle is travel. I mean, we're constantly on the go. We also have family all over the United States because we haven't lived near any of them in the last 20 years, thankfully enough. It's like, oh, come on, just once. I would like to be in the same time zone as a family member. So it kind of led to this idea, how could we invest in real estate? How could we get some enjoyment out of the property? Maybe our family could use it because we both come from pretty large families. And short-term rental happened to check a lot of those boxes. We were able to get some of the depreciation benefits of home ownership. We were still able to use the home. We could get something that was unique. We wanted to be, our kind of thing is we always want to be away from people. We like space. If we can see our neighbor's house, we're too close. So, having that short-term rental model really fit those things that we liked. And basically going in and designing a house with a purpose, to be easy to clean, to be matching, all of that kind of fits our little OCD tendencies in our lives between my spouse and I. So it made a lot of sense because it fit our lifestyle. So we decided to start purchasing short-term rentals that are within a 6-hour drive of where we currently live. And we can, if it's not booked that weekend, we can just take all our dogs with us. The other thing is we have a lot of dogs, take all the dogs with us and go to our short-term rental for the weekend and then, come back home and we have a little vacation. So I think our goal is ultimately to have maybe about 10 different short-term rentals when he's retired out of the military and just kind of bop from place to place to place. We've never really had a home base. We don't really need a home base. So the idea of just being able to kind of jump from place to place to place and, we want to spend a month in Maine, in July. Okay, let's do that. We want to spend the month of February in Florida with my family. Let's go do that. So it gives us that financial freedom to do it. Yeah. And we still have property ownership.
Yeah, that's pretty unique, and I know a lot of a few military people, and then that's exactly what they do. I mean, they bought the long-term rental, and that makes a lot of sense. And but they were not burned by bad tenants. I think that's why they continue to do it. But I can see your lifestyle as well, kind of like how the short-term rental can also help you, and if you're stationed into different bases, or after you retire, you'll be able to travel to different places and all of that. But so how much effort is needed to manage all of that, to manage all these properties?
The worst part, honestly, is standing them up. So it's, it's the normal acquisition part, finding the property, doing the underwriting for that property. And then it's, you're literally furnishing an entire home. So whether it's, 2 bedrooms or 5 bedrooms, whatever you bought, you're furnishing an entire home, everything, furniture, tech, kitchen, whole 9 yards. But once all that's kind of up and running and set on a weekly basis, it's really not very much work. It's more about systems than it is about goals. So if you can go ahead and set up a system for each house, and then you run that system, and obviously the systems have to be pretty similar, across all your properties, it really becomes something that, I don't want to say it's passive, but it's a lot less involvement than something that's like a burr or a fix and flip. It's a lot of back office stuff that realistically, I have a VA that helps me with a lot of that. So I can have a VA kind of just go and handle and, monitor the platforms a couple hours out of the day and take care of a lot of it.
Okay. What about cleaning and repair and stuff like that, the turnover basically between guests. So you have, how do you find the person that's going to do that?
It comes from recommendations. So
Okay.
again, doing community, joining my kind of secret sauce is I join community Facebook groups in every place we buy a home,
Okay.
whether it's like garage sales or, something community related for that
Yeah.
community.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I can just go in and say, hey, I need a handyman to do X, Y, and Z? And then, obviously like 8 people will respond, this person does it, or hey, I do it. Or if you just need some, weird random object, or we actually hire what we call a runner. So
Yeah.
every area has a runner. So we can kind of reach out to this person and say, hey, can you go pick up 6 bottles of wine and, drop them off, and then just send me the receipt and I'll send you the money plus, whatever it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because we include a bottle of wine when guests check in.
Okay.
So, for things like that, it goes back to who, not how. Like,
Yeah.
I don't necessarily need to do all of this. Am I
Yeah.
potentially going to pay a little bit more if I'm not doing that? But it comes down to, what is my time worth? I hate
Hmm.
shopping. I don't enjoy shopping. I don't even drink alcohol. So I'm definitely not going to go shopping for alcohol. So yes, let's outsource that and let someone else go and do that and take the wine. The guests love it. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna continue to offer it, but it's not
Yeah.
something that I particularly want to do. So it really
Okay.
comes down to what you want to do, because you
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
have to do it all.
Yeah, there's someone that was he has a portfolio of these short-term rentals and stuff like that, and he had like a number of VAs that were really just
Mhm.
all about managing the property and stuff like that, and managing the guest experience and all the different boards. And yeah, he appeared to have had a good time doing it. I never heard him say that he was working. He was always like setting up systems and processes and assigning people to them. And then he would be traveling to different, all I heard about this was where he was traveling to, never
Right.
the work that he had to do. No, no, no. He was not making a tremendous amount of money. That's the other thing too. Like he was just making a regular, the profit that he was making every month was just like a reasonable salary. Uh, and that's all he needed. He needed something that he could go and travel, didn't have to work, and so that was
I
pretty good.
think that's another really good point that a lot of new investors don't think about is you don't necessarily need $10,000 a month. You don't need
Mhm.
$25,000 a month. If
Yeah,
you just go and say, this is what I want to accomplish, and I can accomplish that for $5,000 a month, there
yeah,
doesn't need to be that constant, rat race, hamster in the hamster wheel feeling to your
yeah,
investing life. So if 10 properties does it and that makes you happy and that's the way to do it, then that's fine. You don't need 1,000 doors to
yeah,
do it. That's something that I see a lot of people like, oh, my goal is to have 100 doors. Like, okay,
yeah,
great. Why? And they're like, well, it sounded like a good number. And I'm like,
yeah,
but do you know what owning 1,000 doors entails? Like, that's a lot of time that I don't
yeah,
want to sit in on that many asset manager meetings if I'm a part of multiple deals. You know what I mean? It's just, and I see it a lot in the passive investing world. People are like, oh, I'll start out as an LP and kind of learn the business, and then I'll jump to the GP side. And I'm like, well, wait, why? Like, do you realize what being, oh, you want a piece of the GP? Well, you're still working for that piece. And I didn't
yeah,
get
yeah,
into this to create another job. I don't
yeah,
want to sit in on weekly asset manager meetings. I don't want to worry about what the KPIs of the property are. I just would like my distributions, make sure everything's, the train's going down the tracks according to
mhm,
the pro forma, and then let's move on. I don't, and that's just me. But when you explain that to people, that GP sounds awesome, but it comes with a high level of
yeah, yeah.
responsibility, that they're like, oh, wait. And I'm like, yeah, your goal is to basically work yourself into another job.
Yeah. The other thing too that I like is it's kind of when you talk about the metrics, right? So it's how you define your success. And yeah, it's, oh, I want to have like 50 doors and stuff like that. And then no talk, no discussion about how much these doors are going to generate in terms of cash flow and all of that. You just have this arbitrary number that you kind of see when kind of in a race. So, oh, I have 50, I have to 50. It's the accumulation mentality instead of the cash flowing mentality. And so that's why when in my book I talk about focus on what your expenses, what your reasonable expenses are. If you didn't have to work and you want to travel and you want to have you want to retire basically, how much do you need a month, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and then make that your goal, and then build a passive income portfolio based on that. And my example was turnkey rental. I mean, if you wanted to have, you know, like $5,000 a month as a number to live on, you didn't need to, you needed like 20 properties, and, you know,
Yeah.
20 single family rentals, and there you go, you have it. And there's a guy that I was talking to like a few months ago, and he was like, he said that's it. That's I can buy. So that means I can buy like right now he had enough money to basically buy like 4 or 5 properties a year. Just like in a few years I can actually retire. And he's like 30 or something. It's like, yeah. It's like, my God, it's unbelievable.
Well, I mean,
So
think about it from the private lending perspective. If you want $5,000 a month, that
yeah.
basically rolls around to about $500,000. So then you
Hmm.
start working the process backwards. How can I get a
Yeah,
hold of
exactly.
$500,000? And making 12% interest on $500,000 gets you $5,000 a month. So
Yeah.
I feel like in private lending, it's even that much easier to meet those goals because you're not like trying to worry about occupancy and, you know, repairs
Hmm.
to a property. It's like, no, I'm getting paid. I get mailbox money. So as long as I did
Yeah.
my due diligence well on the
Hmm.
front side, you know, it's really very set it and forget it, which allows me to do all these other things you see on my real
Yeah.
estate resume because I'm not spending a significant amount of time worrying about the lending side of it. It's
Hmm.
do a couple hours of due diligence at the beginning of it, wire the funds off to closing, and then, you know, just kind of keep in communication with your borrower according to your comfort level.
Yeah. So on your so for private money lending, so where do you find, or where do people find you if they want to borrow from you? But where do you personally find your borrowers?
That is also thanks to the military community. So
Hmm.
I happen to be stationed in Hampton Roads, which is the largest naval base in the world, is here. There's actually 11 military installations with about a 50-mile radius of where I currently live. So
Wow.
basically, if you throw a rock, you're going to hit 5 people affiliated with the military in some capacity. So it tends to be a really small community. You bump into people, somebody knows somebody else from their command. So actually, all of my borrowers have been either veterans or active duty service members.
Hmm.
And it's just we run into each other through various real estate circles. I'm very specific about the type of property I lend on. And then people
Yeah.
will go, oh, I know someone that does those types of deals. You know, let me introduce you, you know, and it's a very much a relationship way of investing. It's not
Hmm.
transactional like most people think of hard money lending.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Or sometimes also like note investors as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it's much more about the numbers and the property,
Mm-hmm.
not so much about the relationship. Especially if you deal with, you know, non-performing notes, then it's you know, so, you know, it's a little bit different. But okay, so that's very interesting. So yeah, so you have a lot of people that you basically build a relationship with, and these people are investors, and they just flip, or they do rental properties, or do BRRRR, and then you help them kind of like get to a point where they can refinance and stuff like that, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
So we fund just fix and flips, and basically it's properties that they can be in and out of for 3 to 4 months. Generally, the loans are only out 3 to 4 months, so they're
Hmm.
going in, updating, you know, paint and flooring, maybe the kitchen countertops, you know, the kind of the big ticket items that a lot of buyers are going to want to see has been updated,
Yeah.
and then they throw it on the market, and then because of historically low housing inventory right now, everything that hits the market hits MLS. You know, it's got a contract a day or two later. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
would rather, because that's their exit strategy as a lender. I get paid when they exit.
Yeah.
So in a historically low housing inventory, you know, that's my quickest way to go and get paid again versus
Mm.
if they were a BRRRR investor, you know, they are relying on conventional lending to refinance them out. And conventional lending standards kind of did a roller coaster during
Yeah.
COVID. You know, as cases went up, underwriting criteria went up. As cases came down, it loosened up a little bit. It's still not to the point where it's kind of pre-COVID numbers for
Yeah.
non-owner occupied property. So that's why we are not doing anything that's kind of buy and hold. Our exit
Yeah.
strategy needs to be you're selling this property.
Hmm. Well, that's very good. I mean, so what are some of the like what are your terms right now in terms of for private money lending?
The types of properties that we
Like,
will
well, the
lend on.
interest rate, and then kind of like any, you don't have any points or anything like that. It's just like straight on, and
Yeah. So
interest only payment.
Yes. So
Okay.
there's a couple different things we can do because we will lend in the first lien position or the second lien position.
Yeah.
So for example, if a borrower is taking a property subject to, so the first lien is already in place,
Yeah.
they're just going to renovate it. They're going to own it for 3 or 4 months until it's sold on the open market. We will actually come in with a second lien position on that one. And then that's providing them funding for, renovation costs, maybe holding costs for the first mortgage.
Hmm.
And in a situation like that, we just charge a flat interest rate. So if you keep the loan for 3 or 4 months, it doesn't matter when you pay it back in that 3 or 4 months, you're paying the same interest rate because the loans tend to be smaller in nature,
Yeah.
anywhere between 20 and maybe 40, $45,000.
Yeah.
So for those, what I offer the borrowers, again, because it's a very relationship based model, is anybody who's ever done a rehab knows you're hemorrhaging money for the first, month or two you own that property.
Yeah.
So what I offer them is say, hey, we can do, 10% flat, or we can do 12% flat, and you don't have to make monthly interest only payments. You can have
Hmm.
basically your retail buyer pay
At
your
sale.
accumulated interest. And I
Yeah.
have yet to have a borrower turn me down for that because, that's just one less, payment, one less money,
Yeah.
a lot less money going out the door. So again, that's another benefit of working with a private lender is
Yeah.
you have that flexibility to negotiate, what you're looking for, what they are willing to do. And then a lot of times you can kind of meet in the middle. And there's some private lenders that'll say, no, absolutely, I need the monthly mortgage payment.
Yeah.
That's kind of my security blanket. Whereas others that are like, no, we've done 3 or 4 deals together. We'll just do all the interest at the end. We're good. We have a history. We're fine. So that's where building that relationship and maintaining good communication. If there's something going wrong, inform
Hmm.
them something's going wrong.
Yeah.
Don't
Exactly.
try to hide your, head in the sand and avoid it. They're going to
Yeah.
respect you more for keeping them in the loop when things go wrong. So that's where I think the big advantage of having private money, kind of in your back pocket to use as a tool as an active investor really, really helps having that relationship built.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, at the beginning, when we were starting with turnkey, our turnkey portfolio, well, our portfolio of rentals, I should say, yeah, we were looking at kind of like getting these rehabs done and doing and using hard money lending versus private money lending, and it was so much easier to work with private money lenders because you're dealing with a person that they own the money. They're just, they're lending to you. The terms are a lot easier, and yeah, and then you build a relationship with that person. The hard money lender is just an intermediary with the real money, and then you don't know who they are, so he maintains a relationship with them, and then he's just like, he's there to crack the whip on you to make sure that you pay them. And they have all kinds of different criteria that that they have to abide by, because that's just the criteria that they agree to with their the people that are lending the money. So
Exactly.
it's a lot more difficult to work with hard money lender. And we talked to a couple of hard money lenders. We never actually did anything with hard money lender. Uh, they have way more money to lend than the private money lenders. But yeah, we never did anything with the hard money lenders. Always been private money. And it's the same lender over and over that we've had for years, that are just, and for them that's their passive income,
Mm-hmm.
because it's the same. They just keep lending to us. We move them from one property to the next. They get a check every month. There's a friend of mine, actually, he lent us a significant amount of money. He was a flipper in the San Francisco Bay Area, and him and his brother basically lent us their money. That was like what, 4 years ago, and I send them a not a wire transfer, but a direct payment every month and stuff like that. I don't hear anything from them. They just get a check every month, or whatever, the payment every month. And then I talk to them every once in a while and say, hey, how are you doing? You want to do anything else? You want to, no, we're good. We're good. It's like,
Yeah.
okay. But yeah, that's pretty interesting. I mean, they don't have to worry about, yeah, repairs and, oh yeah, this is like, there's a storm that blew out the electric panel in Memphis the other day. And it's just like, okay, they don't have to worry about any of that. They get their check every month, no problem. So
Yep.
returns for them is a little bit lower than what we're getting and what some of our other investors are, or the direct owner of these properties. But you have more it's more passive. You don't have to worry with other things. You have, and if it reaches your goal, then that's what matters. Maybe a little bit less return, but at least you sleep at night, and you have passive income.
Yeah, I call that lifestyle return. So
Yeah.
does the cash flow return meet, and does the lifestyle return meet? And if those two
Mhm.
things are good, then that's the way to move forward.
Yeah, exactly. For me, like, I have like two younger kids, 25, they're not kids, but 20, 26 and 24. So they want to go there. It's exciting to kind of invest and all of that and do all kinds of things. So we play in that field. I like that, but yeah. Some other people, they're more like into the, I just want to retire. I want to be by the beach with air conditioning and
No, my thing is as a horse. I want a horse, and
oh,
they
a
are very
horse.
expensive and very time consuming. So
Uh,
anybody, it's like having a boat. Like
yeah, yeah,
everybody, it's great to know someone who has one. So,
yeah,
so that was my insistent. That was another reason I was very insistent about passively investing. How much time is this going to take? Because if I'm this big real estate guru, am I actually going to have the freedom to go spend 4 hours in the middle of the day, 7 days a week
yeah,
at the barn? Like, that's where I want to
yeah,
be. That's what I'm doing all of this for.
yeah, yeah. So that's very good. I mean, obviously, there's a lot more to know about private money lending if this is what people are interested in, or maybe some kind of your tricks of the trade for the short-term rental owner. What I find very fascinating about your story is again, you adapted, you found the right strategy and tweaked the process and your team to your specific situation, and I think this is phenomenal. People they don't feel necessarily that freedom or that creativity to say, oh no, I need to fix this, I need to do it differently. And you can, and I think if people listen to this, what they should get out of our discussion is that just figure out what you need, what you want, and then make everything, all the other rules bend to your will. That's what you need to do. So I think this is very good. You also have like your Facebook group called Private Lending Lessons. So if people want to reach out to you, I'm sure they can do it there. But tell us a little bit more about that group, that Facebook group, and what you talk about in there. And does it cost anything? Are you selling anything in there?
So the group was actually started out of necessity during COVID. I went out looking for community as an extrovert stuck inside. I'm married to someone. If I get 10 words out of him, that's a chatty Cathy day for him. So every group I joined on social media that had something to do with private lending or passive investing was a lot of just scams and spam. I mean, it wasn't anything educational based. Even Bigger Pockets, everybody knows about Bigger Pockets, and Bigger Pockets has a book about how to price out your scope of work, and you can buy an apartment building in 30 days. But the only way private lending was mentioned was go find a private lender to fund your deals. And we're like,
Yeah.
great, I would love to find the private lenders, And I joke around with people that we take the private part of private lending very seriously because we are the champions of hide and go seek. Because it's very rare for some of us to kind of come forward and say, I do this,
Yeah.
because you get inundated with just loan request after possibility after investment opportunity, which can be very annoying. But going back to trying to find other people doing it, I was unsuccessful. And
Mhm.
somebody mentioned to me, they're like, why don't you start a group? And I'm like, I'm a chemistry professor. I spent 8 years in college doing, molecules. I didn't do marketing. And they said, oh, just do it. Just create a Facebook group. It's easy. It's free. I'm like, okay, fine. And I did. And then about a week later, there were 100 people in it. And I was like, oh, crap. Now I got to do something with this. And it just kind of, I found people, that wanted to talk about some aspect of private lending, like what's proper insurance that you need to be aware of as a private lender. Because I think most people when you're lending don't even worry about the insurance. They don't think about insurance.
Yeah.
So we started bringing people in that had some sort of information to share with people that were specifically about private lending. And the community just kind of grew. It actually hit a year old this month, and there's 4,700 people in it. So
Wow.
it
Congratulations.
really became a phenomenon I was not anticipating.
Yeah.
But the group is 100% free. It's 100% education, 100% networking. We
Mhm.
allow active investors in now because the more active investors I talked to, I realized they also had no education in what private money was, how to use it, what the expectations were. I still to this day routinely get messages and, either Facebook Messenger or email, hey, what's your rates? And it's like, no, private money doesn't work like that.
Mhm.
So the group is open to active investors as well now, so they can kind of get a peek behind the curtain on, what are private money lenders looking for. We have daily
Mhm.
discussions about some aspect of private lending. And my thought was if active investors joined, they were going to be better borrowers because they would know what private lenders are looking for. They would know
Mhm.
what questions, and they would also know how to spot the scams.
Yeah.
Because I can't tell you the number of times I've talked to people and they're like, oh, somebody offered to 100% fund my deal. All I had to do was send them $5,000. And it's always the same terms.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it's $5,000. They're going to give it to you for 5 years. It's going to be
Yeah.
interest only. I mean, it's not secured to property. So if anybody learns anything from this episode, that is not legit. You are never going to give a private money lender any money outside of closing. So
Yeah.
all the money exchanges hands through closing.
Yeah.
But it was a group that just kind of grew out of necessity of people wanting to find other private lenders because there's landlord groups, there's BRRRR groups, you go to your local RIA meeting, there's a ton of active investors there, but there might be in the room maybe 2 or 3 private lenders or people that would consider lending privately, but they're not going to come forward and say, hey, where's the
Yeah.
private lenders? It's just not a thing.
Yeah.
So it's become a really good community for people to be able to kind of come forward, ask questions, learn more about it, whether they're a passive investor or an active investor.
Yeah. So yeah, this is absolutely true. I think so. Some people, they don't even know they might be private money lenders. I mean, they just
Mm-hmm.
have money and they lent money to somebody for a project and says, but they don't think of themselves as a private money lender. I
Yep.
just lend money on this. I said, well,
And it's
and
always
then
like their cousin's best friend decided to become a rehabber. Like I swear to God,
yeah,
it's always their
yeah.
cousin's best friend. And so
Yeah, and then they get their money out, and then they just like, and then they just like, okay, what do I do now? And it's like, but yeah, if they knew, they were aware that they were private money lender, then there's a lot of opportunities out there. And hard money lenders, they know it's much more professional. They have, because they're really going for the business. Private money lenders are more like, oh yeah, I just have money in the bank, and then just like, I don't know exactly what. I don't have a label. I don't have a job, so it's a little bit different. But they're out there, and some of them know who they are. The other thing too that I find interesting is that there's also a lot of people that call themselves private money lenders, and it's not their money, so they have somebody else's money behind them, and then they want points and they want this and stuff like that. And you have the scammers that are just like, oh, I need like $1,000 application fee and stuff like that. It's like, no, it's like
yeah,
not gonna
don't
happen.
do that.
Exactly. So yeah, so there's a lot of people out there there are a lot of scammers. You always have to make sure that you keep your money secure and don't fall for these scams. That's for sure. Well, I think it's about the end of our time, Alex. So it was a pleasure speaking with you. Anything you want to mention before we wrap it up?
Just to feel free to join the group, and if you want to learn more, feel free to send me a message. I'm obviously in the group all the time. I love getting on the phone or a Zoom call and talking with people. There's tons and tons of free resources. We have attorneys come in and talk on a monthly basis about some legal aspect of private lending. I mean, there's just tons of information, free information. The group is not monetized, so it's tons
Mm.
and tons of free information on how to get started.
No, that's fantastic. So again, the Facebook group is called Private Lending Lessons. And in the show note, I'm going to put all your contact information as well, so that if people want to reach out to you directly, they can. So Alex, thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I had a great time.
Great.
Thank you for listening to Break Away from the Rat Race with your host, Eric Martel. If you want to share your story and experience with our listeners, please message us on Facebook at Break Away from the Rat Race. Also, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and our podcast on iTunes.